Hi everyone, my name is Leanne and today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the kids and YA books that I read in October. I really should have done a mid-month wrap-up halfway through October, but I didn't have the foresight for that. So in part one of this wrap-up, I spoke about the adult books, and that included poetry and fiction and non-fiction. In this, I'm going to be talking about kids and YA, which is mostly fiction and one non-fiction. So without further ado, let's just get into the books, and as ever, they will be linked down below in the description if you want to find out more about them. Now, in October, it was Victober, and I did mention in the first part of this wrap-up that I didn't do very well at Victober, but I did finish one book, and that was a reread. It was Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. You may know this is one of my favourite books of all time. I absolutely love both Alice novels, but feel a particular attachment to the first one. I don't feel like I really need to talk about this one too much. Like, everyone knows Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, and we follow a young girl named Alice when she tumbles down the rabbit hole and the strange, wonderful things that happen when she is in Wonderland. What I always say I love about this book is that you can just enjoy the ride of it and enjoy the weird and wonderful experiences, or you can really look at it through a critical lens as a social commentary on many things, including the educational system in Victorian England. This time round, I definitely did the former and just enjoyed being in this world that I felt really familiar with. I just love this book so much. Like, no matter how many times I reread it, I always adore it. But this time round reading it, I had a really interesting reading experience because I also read this book that is Return to Wonderland. And this is a collection of short stories by a bunch of different writers, including Patrice Lawrence, Chris Smith, Robin Stevens, Lauren St. John, Amy Wilson. Some of these authors I'd read before, but some of them were new to me. These are all stories that are in some way related to Wonderland. So we follow a story that is focused on Alice's sister. There is one story where the Mad Hatter decides that he wants to be more normal or average. And my personal favourite story is one that reveals, did the Knave of Hearts really steal those tarts? I think that one was definitely my favourite. If you are an Alice fan, then you're gonna love this. With it being October, I also picked up some seasonal kind of spooky reads. The first of those was Bone Gap by Laura Ruby. This is a really strange book. It is YA, and it follows two brothers who live alone. Their parents aren't in the picture anymore, and it follows the aftermath of someone who is very close to them disappearing. One of the boys witnessed her being taken, but for some reason, a reason that is made obvious to us later on in the book, the search for her is dropped. Carries a huge amount of guilt for this, and simultaneously we are following Roz, the person who disappeared, who is being held captive by a man with mysterious magical powers. At moments, this book is really brutal, and I'd say it's far more literary than a lot of contemporary YA is, which is a good thing, and it's also magical realism, which I've begun to realise I don't think I get on with. There's a lot of stuff in this book that I don't think made any sense, and I found difficult to follow. One thing I did appreciate was that the characters were kind of aware that things didn't make sense. I don't know, I think I've come to realise that I don't really like that magical realism thing. I don't know, this is one that I have mixed feelings on. The next two I definitely don't have mixed feelings on. The first of those is Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell, with illustrations by Faith Erin Hicks. This is a graphic novel that follows the friendship between our two main characters. We have Daya and Josie. They work together every autumn at a pumpkin patch, and it's the only time that they hang out. This is the last year they're going to be working here before they go off to college, and it follows the adventure they have on their final night. Josie absolutely loves the pumpkin patch and is reluctant to misbehave, whereas Daya really brings out a more mischievous side in him. Throughout the graphic novel, we are taken on this whirlwind around the pumpkin patch. It's not just the pumpkin patch, like there's loads of different things and loads of different like stands and activities. There's a maze, there's a bunch of different food. I think that's one of the things I really enjoyed about this graphic novel, was seeing that setting, because it's not really something we have here. And there's also a little love story that's really cute between our two main characters. Really great representation in this book. Daya is bisexual, and it's not made a big deal of. Like, they just talk about her exes, and there's boys and there's girls. It's never a big deal. Really subtle representation in this book as well. Like, there are mixed race families in this book. There are wheelchair users. It's a really funny book as well. If you're looking for a cozy read that you can sit down and read in one sitting, then I would really recommend this one. thoroughly enjoyed it. Next book I think is probably one of my favourite books of the year, and that is Perfectly Preventable Deaths by Deirdre Sullivan. This is the proof copy, but it does look kind of similar to how the final cover looks. This was the perfect Halloween read. This follows 15-year-old twins Madeline and Caitlin, who move from County Cork in Ireland to County Galway and move into this big, creepy castle. This new area has a reputation for young girls going missing, and when Caitlin falls in love with a boy who is really closely linked to one of those disappearances, things take a dark turn. Caitlin is the far more outgoing of the two twins. She's far more aware of her sexuality, she's far more confident, whereas Madeline is a lot more reserved and quiet. But we gradually come to realise that Madeline has a witchy gift, and her powers may be the only thing that can save Caitlin from this boy. It's thrilling, it's lyrical while still being excellent YA. Kind of themes that are really core to YA, like friendships, the strain on the relationship with your parents, discovering your sexuality, and there's also LGBT representation in this book, which is fantastic. It's a really feminist text without it feeling spoon-fed. The boy that Caitlin falls in love with is dangerous in a number of magical ways. Yes, this is a fantasy novel, and the reasons why the boy that Caitlin falls in love with is dangerous does involve, fantasy elements, but also it is allegorical for older men taking advantage of younger girls. It's completely fantastic, and I think if you are someone who enjoyed the Netflix adaptation of Sabrina, I would really recommend this book because I think it's everything that show is and better. It's Irish witches and feminism. Of course I was gonna love it. Next I have It's Not the End of the World by Judy Blume. Judy Blume is kind of the American equivalent of Jacqueline Wilson. Her novels are about young teenagers or tweens experiencing emotional struggles in their lives and also the wider societal issues that surround them. This novel is told from the perspective of a young girl named Karen who is dealing with her parents getting a divorce. She doesn't understand why her parents are getting a divorce, very fearful about what's going to happen. She doesn't really understand what the impacts are going to be, and she's trying to get her parents to get back together. Gradually, this book is about Karen learning that her parents getting a divorce is not the end of the world. I thought it was a great book, but I don't really have much more to say about it other than that. I think everything in this book was handled really well and really sensitively, and I can definitely understand how this book would be really valuable for a kid who's going through something similar to Karen. Next, I have a couple of books that I listened to on audio. The first of those is Cookie and the Most Annoying Boy in the World by Connie Huck. I think Cookie is a really fantastic character. At times, reading about her, I think Cookie is a really fantastic character. At times, as an adult reader, I found her really, really annoying and she really grated on me. But I think we probably were all like that at that age, and I think I probably definitely was. Cookie is someone who always thinks that she's right. She does throw quite a few melodramatic tantrums, but I do feel like that's kind of true to life, so me finding her slightly irritating is not a criticism of the book. The catalyst for the plot in this book is when Cookie's best friend is going to be moving away, and Cookie feels like there's going to be a massive void in her life because of this. So she desperately pleads with her parents to get her a pet. She sees the cutest, most adorable kitten at the pet shop and becomes so attached to this kitten. But disaster strikes when a really annoying boy buys this kitten instead. And then she finds out that this kid is going to be her new next door neighbour. And that is one of the cruxes of tension in this book. Another is Cookie's pursuit of academic achievement. She's really into science and she enters the science fair. And things are even more annoying when this boy wins the science fair instead of her. She also really wants to go on this quiz show, which is basically Blockbusters. I think representation of a young girl that wants to pursue STEM subjects like that is really fantastic, and there is a lot of really important representation seamlessly woven into this book. Like Pumpkinheads, it's just something that's never made a big deal out of. So again, this is one that I would really recommend. The final book I'm going to talk about, I would say, is YA non-fiction. And that is Nadia Okamoto's Period Power. And this is a book that is all about youth activism in relation to periods. I love talking about periods. I love reading about periods. It's genuinely one of my favourite topics. I thought this book was really good, but I found it slightly odd. Really, really comprehensive. It follows so many different aspects of periods, from, you know, what materials period products are made from, and really taking readers through the pros and cons of those different kinds of products. Charts a representation of periods throughout history. It looks at things like the tampon tax. It's a very inclusive book, and it definitely takes a look at how the experience of periods can be different depending on, you know, what your cultural background is, what race you are. It's also inclusive of the fact that not everyone who experiences periods are women. It's really, really comprehensive, and I think that's great. But I'm not exactly sure who this book is for. Like, there is a whole section that really takes you through how to insert a tampon, which is like something that you're not taught in school, or at least I wasn't anyway. And it can be really scary when you're doing it for the first time. So I thought that was an excellent inclusion. But then there were other parts of the book where I thought if you were a young teenager being given this book to learn about your period, it's too much, it's too overwhelming. Like, yes, as a young teenager, I should have been properly taught how to manage my period. I should have been taught not to be ashamed of it. But I do feel like if I was given this book, it would have just been too much. You know, I do feel like teenagers now are a lot more like politically and socially aware than like I was when I was a teenager, so maybe I'm completely off the mark there. I still think this was a really great book, and in fact, despite it being for young adult readers, I did learn a lot from this book. So that is it. They are all of the kids and YA books that I read in October. As I mentioned, they will all be linked down below in the description if you want to find out more about them. And if you've read any of these books, I would love to have a chat about them down in the comments. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week, and I will talk to you in my next video.